When 28 Days Later dropped in 2002, it basically changed the zombie genre forever. These weren't your traditional slow shamblers reminiscent of the Romero-verse. These infected were fast, relentless, and absolutely terrifying. And that rage-fueled chaos went on to inspire just about every zombie movie, show, and game that followed. Without it, we might not have gotten the terrifying sprinters in Left 4 Dead, the parkour-fueled mayhem of Dying Light, Zack Snyder's high-intensity hellspawn zombies in Dawn of the Dead, or even the over-the-top zombie insanity of Zombieland. Because of Alex Garland and Danny Boyle, most zombie media today still focuses on some type of zombie pathogen and fast-as-fuck zombies. So you could only imagine just how excited I was when I heard we would be getting a sequel to 28 Weeks Later this year, after a long 18-year hiatus. Given that we're gonna be getting a new installment to this series, I figured now would be an excellent time to cover the Rage virus in my Could You Survive series. As such, I'll be breaking down the infected, the virus, and your odds of survival, along with a special segment at the end of this video where I briefly discuss some of my fan theories, or hypotheses, for 28 years later. So sit back and relax because this is going to be a fun one. As per usual, before we can deduce our odds of survival, we must first analyze our primary threat, being the infected. Unlike your traditional and even most contemporary zombies, the infected in 28 Days and Weeks Later are technically alive, which means they can be killed like any other ordinary person. They literally experience no increased levels of durability. You can actually shoot these fuckers at center mass and it'll drop them, either on the spot or when they die of blood loss. The infected can also starve to death or die of either dehydration and or exposure to the natural elements, which means that the infected tend to have a surprisingly short shelf life. But because of the nature of the Rage virus, these infected individuals do experience increased levels of resiliency, strength, and stamina. These infected persons are also drawn to noise and bright sources of light. Their primary goal seems to be to spread the pathogen which has driven them mad, while also aiming to take their wrath out on any non-infected person. They don't even fucking eat the people they attack. They're so obsessed with infecting their victims that they'll even vomit profusely when attacking people, just to get that infected blood into any exposed orifices. That being said, we haven't really seen if they eat other animals. As a matter of fact, it doesn't seem like they even eat or drink anything at all. They also assault their prey with zero concern for their own safety, and surprisingly enough, they demonstrate the ability to climb ladders and swim, albeit their swimming skills kinda fucking suck. The most notable feature of these infected individuals are their bright red sclerae. That and their ability to run really fucking fast. So, given their speed, strength, aggression, and the virulent nature of the Rage virus, it's easy to see why these infected are so damn terrifying. The infamous Rage virus was created by Cambridge scientists Clive and Warren in an attempt to create an inhibitor which would target the neurochemicals which cause anger and excessive aggression in people. The purpose of this medical creation was to build a world where there was less rage, and believe it or not, they actually managed to successfully develop this inhibitor. But then, the colossal jackass known as Warren concluded that the best way to spread this inhibitor was through the use of the Ebola virus. That's right, instead of delivering this anger suppressant through the use of a pill or an aerosol, Captain Dipshit decided to work with the fucking Ebola virus. And within 2 weeks of conducting this silly little experiment, several isolated genomes within the Ebola virus reacted to and then mutated the inhibitor, thus causing this suppressant to become a stimulant. Meaning that instead of making test subjects less violent, the new variant of this pathogen caused people to be uncontrollably aggressive, thus creating the Rage virus as we know it today. After witnessing the development of one of the worst biochemical agents in human history, Clive decided to resign from the Cambridge project. Clive then went on to inform the Animal Freedom Front of the animal cruelty being conducted by Warren's team. And this of course leads us to the opening scene in 28 Days Later. As we can clearly see, the Rage virus can infect chimps and human beings. Hence we can safely assume that it can probably infect most primate species. We also quickly learn that the virus is blood-borne, when the chimp bites one of the activists and thus turns them into a rage-infected human. We then learn that the virus can turn a person in less than 1 minute, often taking anywhere between 10 to 30 seconds. But we also learn that people can turn nearly instantly if they get a shit ton of blood vomited on their face. Even a tiny droplet of this contagion can turn you into one of the rage infected. Oh, by the way, the virus also doesn't just depend on blood, but seems to be transferred through the exchange of any bodily fluids, including saliva, which is something we learn in 28 weeks later. Infected persons often bleed from their eyes, their sclerae turn red, and the rest is history. What this ultimately means is that the rage virus can spread insanely rapidly. There is literally no incubation period whatsoever. Once you're infected, you basically switch teams in less than a minute, which is a truly terrifying concept to imagine. But oddly enough, some people are immune to the effects of the virus. These people hence become carriers of the contagion, still being capable of infecting others. While we only ever see 2 immune carriers in 28 weeks later, we can reasonably assume that there were probably some more asymptomatic carriers. And these people probably died because their immunity did not prevent the infected from wanting to kill them. Furthermore, the film does go on to heavily imply that those infected by asymptomatic carriers are then infected by a mutated variant of the rage virus, one which allows the infected individual to retain a heightened level of intelligence, as seen with Don Harris, who was actively avoiding the military and intelligently stalking his kids throughout the movie. All in all, the rage virus is a truly nightmarish contagion. Given all of the information we've covered thus far, the core question of this thought experiment still remains. Could you survive a rage virus outbreak? Now, since this viral outbreak has a distinct epicenter, we can easily assume that your odds of being at ground zero would be pretty low, regardless of whether or not the point of origin is at Cambridge or at some other random location. As such, the real question ought to be whether or not you should even care to prepare for this virus once it breaks out. And to be honest, it really depends on your location in relation to ground zero. The rage virus, as we know it thus far, can only be spread through the exchange of bodily fluids. It is not an airborne pathogen, and the infected aren't intelligent enough to spread it by driving cars and organizing entire armies. So if the outbreak originates on an island, like it did within the canon timeline of 28 days and weeks later, odds are that the virus will stay on said landmass. The non-existent incubation period, while effective in getting the virus to spread quickly in a localized area, also hinders its ability to spread the virus discreetly and abroad. You're just not going to have an infected person sneaking onto a plane or boat and getting away with it, unless they're an asymptomatic carrier, which, by the way, is a rare fucking occurrence. We literally only have a sample size of 1 from the original outbreak, and even then, the spread of the virus literally requires physical contact, thus further reducing the virus's effective spread range. In short, this virus will likely burn out quickly once it manages to infect everyone in a given area. And this reality becomes even more obvious once we consider that the rage infected can die of starvation, dehydration, and/or exposure to the natural elements. Within the lore of 28 days later, the virus was successfully quarantined by NATO, which basically formed a blockade around the United Kingdom, killing any and all refugees attempting to escape via the English Channel, the Strait of Dover, the Irish Sea, the North Sea, or any of the other smaller islands off the coast of the English Isles. Even the Eurotunnel, or the Channel Tunnel, was sealed to prevent cross-contamination from England to France. While the blockade of the UK was ongoing, the rage infected all starved to death at roughly the 5-week mark. The original outbreak never even made it out of England, and it also predictably burned out rather swiftly. But even if we were to take the scenario presented to us in 28 weeks later, where the rage virus makes landfall in France, somehow, one would be hard-pressed to justify claiming that said virus can somehow cross the Atlantic. Hell, it wouldn't even be able to make it across the Suez Canal, once all entry and exit points over said canal are destroyed by Egypt's military forces. While the rage-infected can swim, they ain't swimming like Michael fucking Phelps. They're gonna drown attempting to cross such a body of water. A literal man-made river which splits Africa off from the Middle East. The same could be said of other island nations as well. The virus wouldn't be able to get to Australia. It wouldn't be able to get to Japan or the Philippines or parts of Indonesia and so forth. And by the time the virus spreads across Europe, we would eventually learn of the existence of asymptomatic carriers, thus eliminating that threat entirely. Now, if we were to assume that you're near ground zero, all you'd realistically have to do is hunker down for a few weeks. If you could survive the collapse of society, while somehow securing enough food and water for 5 to 10 weeks, you'd eventually outlast the infected. The only really bad place to be would be at the epicenter of the outbreak, or within a significantly close proximity to it, so close that preparing the required food and water would be impossible without risking a dangerous cross-country journey to a safer location. And obviously, this would all be exacerbated if you're in a dense urban environment. While the rage virus is intense and admittedly pretty fucking scary, it's actually pretty survivable. For fuck's sake, you don't even have to aim for headshots. For most of us, the real hardship will come from the inevitable global economic depression that said pandemic would cause, the severity of which would depend on the virus's point of origin. But as previously stated, if you're near the epicenter or exactly at ground zero, you're gonna be in for a rough fucking time. The collapse of society will not be pretty, and these fast fucking sprinters will be running you down at the most inopportune times. Like, imagine you're at work, and then suddenly, without warning, a horde of these assholes come charging into your building. You know what? The idea of getting offed on the clock is honestly nightmare fuel for me. But in all seriousness, those at ground zero, or near it, will have extremely low survival odds. The infected don't even have to seriously harm you to infect you. And things will get unbearably chaotic if you're running through a crowd with a mixture of infected and non-infected persons. But these odds will definitely improve as time goes on. Eventually, the infected will reach a peak population in your region, and eventually their numbers will begin to dwindle, until they eventually perish. And once they're gone, your situation goes from being in a zombie apocalypse to just a generic apocalypse where general survival is your only concern. The minute you can find safety, and the minute you can afford to hunker down for just a few weeks, is the minute that your odds of survival skyrocket. So yeah, this is seriously not as bad as other zombie apocalypses. It'll start hard and fast, and then it will end. As such, I'd say those who are on the other side of the world will have a 100% survival rate. Those at ground zero will have 5% odds, and those within the region containing the outbreak's epicenter would have roughly 25% chance of survival, with those odds improving the further away you are from the point of origin, and with those odds also further improving as time goes on. Now again, I must remind all of you that these percentages are all speculative. These really aren't exact estimates or odds, but I'm sure you get my point. This is far from being in the top 10 worst zombie apocalypses. So, I just got done telling you all that the rage virus basically ain't shit. Yet somehow it seems to have done some serious damage 28 fucking years later. How is this the case? Well, either this is a case of shitty writing, or perhaps the rage virus has mutated in some way. Hopefully the upcoming film delves into this a little bit in detail. Be that as it may, I do have some theories for all of you. Maybe the pathogen became airborne. Maybe mentally insane asymptomatic carriers have helped to fuel the spread of the virus. Maybe some of the infected developed heightened levels of intelligence, causing them to seek food and water, thus improving their shelf life. In a worst-case scenario, the virus could have mutated to resemble a more traditionally zombie-like virus. Or perhaps it's a combination of all of these factors. We don't even know if the virus has taken over the world, we just know it's fucking up Europe right now. Regardless of how the virus has managed to survive for such a long period of time, I'm personally stoked for the arrival of 28 years later. I've been waiting for this movie since I was in fucking middle school. So I can't wait. I'm excited. Anyways, if you like this sort of content, please like, share, and fucking subscribe. Click the bell as well, that way you may be notified when I publish a new video. And remember that you may opine anytime if you feel so inclined, down in the comment section. I'm Captain Gold, and I hope to see you in my next Gold Standard video.